there. Okay.
Hi, teacher.
Hi. Okay. So let's wait a couple of minutes, see if someone else joins. Let's see. Okay, so I think we're gonna just go ahead and start. So you there?
Yes, teacher.
Okay. All right, so today we'll be looking at task 4, which is the last one in the speaking section. So this is actually quite similar to task 3, the one we did last class. It's an integrated one. You do have to do something before you get to answer the question. It's an academic one, but the difference is you won't read anything anymore. So everything about this question will be extracted from the listening part. So the thing is, you will listen to a short, sometimes not too short, academic lecture in which the professor will be explaining this topic. And then you get the question, which is always, so using the points and examples from the lecture, explain and whatever the topic is. You will get 30 seconds to prepare and 60 seconds or 1 minute to speak. So the same timing, the only difference is that you just get the lecture. There's no reading here. Okay. So any questions so far? Is it okay, the structure?
Yes, teacher, is clear.
All right. Okay, the topics are pretty much the same. You got psychology, biology, and business as your most common ones. Rarely you will find something like art or history or what have you, but it's usually psychology, biology, and business. The same types of topics. It's still animals and plants here, adaptations, memory, brain, learning, experiences, emotions, and marketing or advertising techniques or convincing customers. I don't know. The only thing I would say is like you have more biology topics. They may be a bit harder because you have more information. It's a bit longer since you don't have the reading. So that would be it. Now, what's important to say, and here's where it gets different, the structure of the lectures. But before we do that, hi, Lucy, are you there?
Hi, teacher. I'm sorry I got late.
No worries, that's fine. But whenever you're able to, please, if you don't mind turning your camera on when you can.
Yes, teacher. I am sorry. Today I cannot put my camera. I'm sorry because I have a low battery in my telephone and I don't have this internet service today in my home
Okay,
because I had problems changing the operator.
okay, that's fine, Lucia. Thanks for telling me, anyhow.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
So in this lecture, what you will have is first a short introduction. So like any other lecture, the professor will start the class by giving a bit of context, something like, hey guys, today we're going to be looking at this topic. Now, there in the introduction, you may have different things. Like you can find maybe a definition on what the topic is, a short explanation, maybe an example, different things. For example, if it's about pollution, the professor could be like, we're going to be looking at pollution, which is this, and it occurs in these places, and I don't know. So the thing is, the introduction is never going to be that important. So I wouldn't worry that much. I don't know, the biggest advice I could give you here is just don't worry too much about the introduction. I wouldn't even try and take so many notes from it because, to be honest, you're not going to use it in your response. So I would try and be, paying attention and hearing what the general idea is, the bigger picture, what the lecture will be about. But I wouldn't worry that much on like taking specific notes or understanding every single detail because it's not that important. So just try and get the general idea, what the topic is in general. Now, what is important is what comes next. And then you will have, basically the professor will break down that topic into two subtopics. So whatever it is, you will always have two subtopics. If it's pollution, for example, maybe you have two causes of pollution or two effects or two ways to solve it or two theories on how it works or two definitions of the word pollution. So you may have different things, but you will always, no matter what, have two subtopics. So that's something else, that differentiates this from the last one. So for example, you could have something like water contamination and air pollution, two types of pollution. Now, the thing is that sometimes, usually, you will have these very specific terms here. So you need to make sure that you catch them. When you're listening, you will have something like, okay, so the first one is, so pay attention to that. Try to hear what the word or the expression is, because you will have to mention it in the exact same way in your response. Now, then you may have a short definition or a short explanation on what this is. So what water contamination is, how it works, I don't know. And finally, you will be given an example as well. So maybe as something specific, maybe the name of a river, the history of a lake, or how this ocean got contaminated. I don't know about, but you will have a very specific example in there. So it will always be like that. First, the introduction from bigger to smaller, then the subtopic, its definition, and then the example. Okay, so the most important part is for you to catch the subtopics and the example. The same will happen here, by the way. The same goes with the subtopic too. Another subtopic like air pollution, maybe, its definition, and finally the example. Okay, so is that okay? Do you have any questions so far?
No, teacher.
Okay. Now, another thing, one tip I could give you here, I mean, of course, what you need to do is according to this. So you get two topics and the two, and of course, have the general idea of what the topic, the lecture is about. Now, one tip I can give you is make sure that you read the question. You actually read it because a lot of people will just skip it or focus on their notes on or preparing, and they won't pay attention to the question. And the question usually has a very summarized expression that about what the topic is. So you could actually use that in your response. So make sure that you read the question, that you use it in your response, because sometimes you even have the subtopics in there. You have both subtopics or maybe sometimes the examples as well. So just read the question. Another thing, Remember, in your response, you're just going to have to report the way we did for the previous ones. So you need to use reporting verbs in the simple present. So the professor states, according to the professor, he claims. You need to use them. You need to make sure that at least you have 2 or 3 of them in your response. When you're listening, pay attention to these transitions. They help you big time because the professor will use them. They will say something like, okay, so first we have this first topic, for example, or take this as an example. So pay attention to them. They will help you. Another thing is that in your response, you're going to have to summarize everything because you have you have 1 minute for something that lasts like 2 or 3 minutes. So you are going to have to leave some things behind. So don't worry too much. Just make sure that you catch all those relevant ideas, the most important information, and the details are not that important. So if you got like 10 and you mentioned 2 of them, that's okay. And finally, don't worry, try to speak so fast or to make it in time, just speak calmly, take it easy with enthusiasm, try to articulate your words. Okay. Try to articulate the words as much as you can, make it clear for the listener to understand what you're saying, and make it look like you actually like the topic, like you're passionate about. Okay, so those are some tips. So I don't know if you guys have any questions so far so that we can move on to the example. Do you? Okay. All right, so now we're gonna be listening to the exam. So we'll listen to the lecture and you guys need to take some notes. So get a piece of paper, a pen. You know what you're looking for. Try to have your info, organized, your notes organized. So look for the topic, the general idea that could be in the question, the 2 subtopics, and 2 examples. So let's see.
Listen to part of a lecture in a business class.
If a consumer has to choose between 2 products, what determines the choice? Assume that someone, a purchaser, is choosing between 2 products that cost the same, okay? If people have a choice between 2 identically priced products, which one will they choose? They choose the one they think is of higher quality, of course. But what does it mean for a product to be a high-quality product? Well, business analysts usually speak of 2 major factors of quality. One factor is reliability, and the other is what we call features. So reliability. What's reliability? Well, a product is reliable if it works the way we expect it to work, if it can go a reasonable amount of time without needing repairs. If a product, a car for example, doesn't work the way it should and needs repairs too soon, we say it's unreliable. So product reliability means basically the absence of defects or problems that you weren't expecting. It used to be that when people thought about product quality, they thought mainly about reliability. Today, it's different. People do still care about reliability, don't get me wrong. It's just that manufacturing standards are now so high that, we'll take cars for example, today. Today's cars are very reliable. So reliability is important, but it's not going to be the deciding factor. So if reliability isn't the deciding factor anymore, what is? Features. All those extras, the things a product has that aren't really necessary but that make it easier to use or that make it cool. For example, new cars today are loaded with features like electric windows, sunroofs, air conditioning, stereos, and so forth. When people are comparing products today, they look at features because reliability is pretty much equal across the board. And that's why manufacturers include so many features in their products.
Using points and examples from the lecture, explain the two major factors of product quality and how their role in consumer decision-making has changed.
Okay, guys. So that was it. Any comments on the lecture? What do you think of it? Okay. So then, could you please tell me what it was about? So what was the general topic? What was the lecture about?
Quality factor of customer choices.
Okay, quality factors, yeah. Maybe that influence customers' choices. Okay, and that's correct, yes. I remember the question said something like consumer decision making, maybe, so how consumers make their decisions and the factors that make up quality. I like that you had this word, factors. So we know that we have two of them, right? Two subtopics. So what was the first one now? What was the first subtopic?
Reliability.
Nice, reliability. Okay. Now, do we have any explanation whatsoever on what it was? So what's reliability? What's the definition? Yes, Lucia?
That works as we expect to work.
Okay, yes, when a product works as we expect it to work. Okay, as expected. Right. What else? Anything else you would like to add here?
Basically, absence of defects.
Nice, the absence of defects. All right. Okay. Now, what about the example? So how does the professor illustrate that concept on reliability?
The professor talked about a card when the customer need to repair the card, something like that.
Yes, when they need to repair the car, what does that mean? Is it reliable or unreliable?
Unreliable.
Exactly. So if it needs repair, it's an unreliable car. But if it doesn't need them, it's a reliable car. Okay. So what else makes a reliable car? Does it need repairs?
With the good manufacturer standards.
Okay. Manufacturer standards. And it also lasts like a reasonable amount of time, right? It lasts some time. Okay, guys. Now, what about the second subtopic? So what was the other factor that influenced a customer's choices?
The filters.
Yeah.
Okay, great, features. So what about them? What are they? What are features?
Is when the product is easy to use.
Okay. What else? Anything else? I think features are like these extra characteristics or extra things that you add to a product that make them, as you say, easier to use and maybe more appealing to the customer. So those are not really necessary things, but they make them, they attract the consumer. Okay.
Many
And what
uses.
about the example? I'm sorry?
That have many uses.
Okay, yes, they have many uses. You can have different things. All right. Okay, so what about the example? How does the professor illustrate that idea?
The car, for example, that have to have air conditioner or music or many things inside the car.
Exactly, air conditioning. I mean, stereos. Okay. So yes, so manufacturers are now competing to add these features to cars because they know that this is what customers are looking for, you know? I think that reliability is quite the same right now. So what are they looking at? Features. Okay, guys. Anything else anybody would like to add to this brainstorming? Okay, guys. So finally, as for the response goes, so in your response, here's what you need. So at the beginning, you need a short introduction in which you explain what the main idea is, what the topic in general was about. So you can just say something like, listening is about, or the professor discusses. Both are okay. You can use another one as well if you like. You know, we have this close up on, I don't know, many terms you could use, but something like that. So you need to introduce what the topic is. So for example, the listening is about, or I will try and say though, the lecture instead of listening. So the lecture is about, I don't know, consumer decision making and product quality. Now here's a transition that you guys can use. However, careful with this. It takes some time. So to be honest, I would try to skip it sometimes because really, you know, you don't have that much time. People usually run out of time. So you could use it if you believe you're good with time. You could say after introducing the topic, the professor features two, and then you need to basically tell me how the topic is related to the subtopics. So we know that these subtopics are two factors that influence a consumer's decision or that make up quality. So that's what you could say here. So the professor features two factors that make up quality. But it's not necessary, as you can see, because at the beginning you can just say the lecture is about consumer decision making and the two factors that make up quality. And that's okay. So it depends. If you want to save time, you can skip this part. It's like extra option. Okay. And then you go right off to the explaining what the subtopics are. Okay, so you say to start or first, the lecture describes reliability, which is when a product works the way it should, the way it's expected to work, when it doesn't have defects maybe. So for instance, and then you go with the example. Cars, I don't know, a car is said to be reliable when it lasts a reasonable amount of time, when it doesn't need repairs, you don't need to take it to the mechanics constantly. And then you say, then the professor goes on to explain, or moreover, the professor describes features as these extra characteristics that a product has that are not necessary, but that have many uses and that make them easier to use or more practical or more appealing to the consumer. And to illustrate, she mentions how cars or car manufacturers are now competing to add air conditioning or stereo, sunroofs, electric windows. I don't know, you know? So that's the way you gotta do it. You got a short introduction at the end, and then you move on as quickly as possible to the two subtopics. I wouldn't try, I would try to keep it to 10 seconds, the intro. It really needs to be short. Okay, guys? So I don't know if this is okay, if you maybe have any questions about the response, the template.
Teacher, and we need to conclude that idea.
Nope, not really. It's not necessary that you do one. I don't think you will have time either. In case you have extra time, which usually doesn't happen, but in case you do, you can say something like, I don't know, you could say, so that's, or therefore, or in short, those are the two factors that make up quality. So basically just restate that, or the introduction, or that's how a consumer chooses between two products with the same price. So like a closing idea, but it's not necessary you won't add anything, and it's just to fill up time if you got some extra time. Any other question? Okay, guys. So is there anyone who would like to put everything together? We already know what this topic was about. We have the ideas there. So anybody would like to try with the timer? Would you?
I would like to try, teacher.
Okay, that's great. That's awesome. So here it is. You can go ahead.
Okay. The recording is about quality factors that influence customers' choices. To start, the professor describes the reliability term that works as we expect to work. For example, something that we want to buy, that basically is absence of defects. The examples he brings, he wrote, it was about a car that normally is absence of manufacturing, it's with a good manufacturing standards. And secondly, the professor talk about the features because some things are easier to use. And for example, the car, when we buy, is with air conditioner, stereos, or electronic windows.
Okay, great, just in time. I like how you organized it, you kept the structure, your intro was short, you had your transitions there, you use your reporting verbs, careful though, like you were saying, you know, the example that the professor brings or talks about, and then you correct yourself with broad. So it's actually okay, it's even better if you keep it in the simple present. So the lecturer describes, talks about, brings, gives, defines, describes, mentions. Okay, so it's okay if you keep the simple present because these are like facts, you know, so keep with that. Okay, I have to say, don't forget, you know, here, when you say the lecturer describes reliability, which by the way is a business word, you know, and that's another thing. Vocabulary, not only vocabulary, but word choice as well. So it's not the same, for example, if you say it's about how people choose things instead of you saying it's about how customers choose products, right? So make sure to check out some business words. Reliability was one of them. So careful with it. And don't forget these short, well, these are called relative pronouns, but basically connectors that you use to link everything, you know, describes reliability. You can say which is defined as, or that is, or that occurs when. Okay, so try and use those maybe connectors there. So yes, maybe there's some tips, but well done overall. That was your first one and it was great.
Thank you, teacher.
Okay, thanks. Any questions by now? Okay, so now we're gonna, okay, I thought you were gonna ask a question. Okay, so now we're gonna practice that. Since we're just three, there's just three of us, we're gonna have time to maybe do two of them. So let's see, we could do a psychology one and then a biology one. If you agree. Okay. Okay, guys, so I'm gonna play the second lecture. Make sure to take some notes. And here you go.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class.
When people are in difficult situations, sometimes they experience feelings of helplessness or psychological pain. So what do? They unconsciously use strategies called defense mechanisms to protect themselves psychologically from their painful emotions. Let's say a woman has a pet dog. She's had this dog for a long time, and he's kept her company and guarded her for years. But one day he runs away. This woman looks everywhere and asks other people if they've seen her dog, but she just can't find him. Now, she feels helpless and sad because she misses her dog, so she'll unconsciously find ways to deal with her painful feelings. One defense mechanism she might use is fantasy. With fantasy, the woman uses her imagination. So instead of just feeling helpless and sad about her lost dog, she invents a happy story in her mind. She might imagine that a nice family found him and feeds him, and that he's really happy with them. She'll picture the dog playing, running around, having fun. Because of this, she doesn't have to feel sad about her dog running away. It's a fantasy. It's not real, but it keeps her pain away. Another defense mechanism she might use is what we call sublimation. Sublimation is different from fantasy because sublimation isn't about pretending. It's about turning negative emotions into something useful, practical. So the woman might start a dog training school. That way, by training dogs, perhaps she can help prevent other people's dogs from running away like hers did. In other words, with sublimation as a defense mechanism, the woman redirects her negative feelings about her dog into a positive, constructive activity.
All right, guys. Now the question is, using points and examples from the talk, describe the two defense mechanisms mentioned by the professor. Okay, two defense mechanisms mentioned by the professor. All right. So now you guys will have 30 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay, guys. Go for it. Anyone would like to try?
I can try, teacher.
Okay, great. So you may go ahead.
Okay. The lecture is about the mechanism defense when people have psychology pains. To start the lecture, describe the first mechanism, fantasy. Fantasy is when the person invent a happy story, and she mentioned about the example of the dog. When the dog is lost, she invented the dog found a great family. And then the professor goes on to explain the second defense mechanism is the sublimation, is when the people turn in the negative feelings and practical function. And she mentioned the example when she goes to the training school for a dog in order to the dog improve her skill and not lost.
Okay, nice. So well done. I love the structure. It lasted, I mean, your intro was exactly 10 seconds and then you got 25 seconds for each one of them. I think you kept that. You used the template or kind of, and you kept the reporting verbs. Don't forget they are third person. So she mentions, she describes, careful with that practice. And then you mentioned, I love how summarized your definitions were. So awesome, you didn't waste time explaining the definition. So lecture describes fantasy, which is about turning negative emotions into productive activities, or sublimation, which is about business. Okay. The only thing I could say, careful with the examples. So for example, in this case, the professor was a female, she. And then when you talked about the dog and the woman who loses their dog, you also said she, right? And it was like, she mentions that when she lost her dog, so it sounded like you were talking about the professor instead of that, the example. So one thing you can do, because I know you save time there actually, because you didn't give context, you were directly to the point. So when she loses her dog, she can create I don't know, a training school for dogs, or she can make up a happy story. However, it's important that we mention at least once the context, since the example is the same for both, which is something that, by the way, happens with psychology a lot in business. With biology, it will be two animals. But with psychology, for example, if both examples are about the same, maybe at the beginning you could mention a bit of context. So lectures about defense mechanisms, and the professor illustrates this with, or illustrates it better with the example of a woman that loses her dog. So here you can just say, the woman may, to deal with her pain, she may do this, or she may do that. So in that case, you're gonna have that context, okay? Careful with the preposition about to. You don't need it when you have these recording verbs. So I think it's just with talk. So talk about. But then when you say describes, you can just go right off, explain the same, okay? So everything okay? Any questions so far?
No, teacher, thank you.
Okay, guys. So who else wants to go?
I can try it.
All right, Ned. Nice. So you can go now.
Okay, the listening is about how the human psychologists can like kind of play with us. Just after introducing the topic, the person who is talking about the psychology, she mentioned that we can have like we have difficult and when we feel in selfishness, unconscious or our unconscious try to protect us. So she meant to start the lecture, she describes how we have two type of like how to defend us with the fantasy and the sublimation. The fantasy is about how we can use our imagination and turn like kind of like like find a story, a happy story. And sublimation is how we can turn the negative feelings to protective function.
Okay, yes. So, all right. So the only thing I'm worried about is time. Okay, so you don't have that much time. So at the beginning, I know that you have that long introduction, and this is something I said. You just have to summarize that 10 seconds. So the lecture is about defense mechanisms, and then you say to start, the professor describes fantasy right off, okay? So that you make it in time to explain what fantasy is and give the example, and then explain sublimation and give the example. Okay, so 10 seconds for the intro, or 15 at most, but I would say 10 better. And then you move on to the topics. Okay?
Okay, yeah,
That's the only. No worries, that's the only. Okay, guys. Anybody else would like to go with this one?
Can I try, teacher?
Of course, Lucia.
Thank
So,
you.
go ahead now.
Well, the lecture is about psychological methods as defense mechanism in difficult situations. To start, the lecture describes this fantasy when people try to invent an imagination history to bring happiness. For example, in this case, the professor talks about the woman who lost her dog, and she invented a story about how her dog find a good family. And the second is about of the sublimation term, which is defined as turn negative feelings in different useful and practical situations. For example, this dog could get and be trained, could get a training in order to don't get lost.
Okay, in order not to get lost. Okay. All right, so well done. I see you were just missing some time, a little bit, like 5 seconds, maybe 10, but that's fine to be your first try. That's great. You know, it's all about getting used to it. You're gonna realize for how long you should be speaking in each part. So at the beginning, that's why I'm saying just 10 seconds. Use what you have in the question. So the lecture is about 2 defense mechanisms. We don't really have to explain what they are. Maybe briefly, here you can say something like, so in order to protect herself, or in order to deal with her pain, she may invent or make up this happy story. Okay, so quickly, but it's not really necessary. The same here. You're gonna realize that usually you just have time to give one sentence here. The lecture describes fantasy, which is inventing a happy story to deal with the pain. Okay, or and then you go with the example. Okay, the same one sentence. So since you have mentioned at the beginning probably the context, so you could say the woman may do this. Okay, but that's just practice. You're gonna realize with practice it gets easier, it gets better. So okay, so maybe that. What else can I say? Careful, some grammar. What are they? Gerunds. So for example, when you have the definitions and it's a verb, it's usually going to be a gerund. So which is turning negative emotions, right? Or to turn, but turning sounds better. So turning negative emotions into this. Okay. What else? What else? I think that's it. So maybe just timing, one sentence for each one, and you guys will be fine. So do you have any questions so far? Want to do one more?
Thank you.
Okay, let's do one more. We're going to do a biology one before we leave. So let's hurry up. Here it goes.
And 60 seconds to speak. Listen to part of a lecture in a biology class.
Today, I want to talk about seabirds. Now, seabirds hunt and eat fish, and, well, their food can be hard to find because their food source is spread out over a large expanse of water. So what seabirds have done is that over time, they've made adaptations. They've developed special characteristics that help them find food. One adaptation involves the length of the bird's wings. The albatross, for example, is a large seabird that spends most of its life flying over ocean waters in search of food, fish to feed itself, and to carry back to the nest for its chicks. Now, most birds flap their wings up and down when they fly, which uses up a lot of energy. But the albatross has these special long wings that it can hold perfectly still. It's able to fly without moving its wings up and down. These long wings allow it to glide or float on the wind, and this uses very little energy. This is important because, as I said, the albatross has to cover a huge expanse of ocean to locate food, sometimes up to 1,100 miles a day. Because of its long wings, it can glide along over the ocean, using little energy as it searches for food. Another important adaptation of many seabirds is an acute, highly developed sense of smell. Take the fulmar. Like the albatross, the fulmar needs to find food that's scattered far out over the ocean. But the fulmar has a rather unusual advantage. It has tiny tubes inside the nose holes in its beak, and these special tube-shaped nostrils help it to pick up the scent of food. Now, this highly developed sense of smell is especially important because the fulmar's main source of food, plankton, are tiny organisms that are hard to see, but they give off a very sharp, distinctive odor. So when fulmars are flying around looking for food, they may not be able to see them, but they can find the plankton by smelling them, even from far away.
Using the examples of the albatross and the fulmar, explain two special adaptations that have developed to help seabirds find food.
Okay, guys. So now you have 30 to prepare. All right. So you guys ready? Anybody would like to try? I don't know. Maybe Lucia. Wanna go first?
Teacher, I am sorry because my connection is unstable and I couldn't listen. Oh,
Okay. All right. That's okay. Anybody else then?
Teacher, I can listen very well the lecture.
Oh, okay. So is there? It might have been my internet then. Maybe that was it. Okay. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna play one more time. So let me know if it's better. Okay, and then we'll try. So here it goes.
And 60 seconds to speak. Listen to part of a lecture in a biology class.
Today I want to talk about seabirds. Now, seabirds hunt and eat fish, and, well, their food can be hard to find because their food source is spread out over a large expanse of water. So what seabirds have done is that over time they've made adaptations. They've developed special characteristics that help them find food. One adaptation involves the length of the bird's wings. The albatross, for example, is a large seabird that spends most of its life flying over ocean waters in search of food, fish to feed itself and to carry back to the nest for its chicks. Now, most birds flap their wings up and down when they fly, which uses up a lot of energy. But the albatross has these special long wings that it can hold perfectly still. It's able to fly without moving its wings up and down. These long wings allow it to glide or float on the wind, and this uses very little energy. This is important because, as I said, the albatross has to cover a huge expanse of ocean to locate food, sometimes up to 1,100 miles a day. Because of its long wings, it can glide along over the ocean, using little energy as it searches for food. Another important adaptation of many seabirds is an acute, highly developed sense of smell. Take the fulmar. Like the albatross, the fulmar needs to find food that's scattered far out over the ocean. But the fulmar has a rather unusual advantage. It has tiny tubes inside the nose holes in its beak, and these special tube-shaped nostrils help it to pick up the scent of food. Now, this highly developed sense of smell is especially important because the fulmar's main source of food, plankton, are tiny organisms that are hard to see, but they give off a very sharp, distinctive odor. So when fulmars are flying around looking for food, they may not be able to see them, but they can find the plankton by smelling them, even from far away.
Using the examples of the albatross and the fulmar, explain two special adaptations that have developed to help seabirds find food.
Okay. So, okay, I'll give you 30 more seconds to prepare. Okay, guys. So now, who would like to go?
Can I try?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so you may go now.
The lecture is about how the seabirds can live and can survive finding food. To start, the lecture describe how difficult it is to find the fish because the ocean is so huge. So he mentioned that how they have two type of seabirds, how they can hunt the fish. One is about how they with the wings, with their wings, he have to up and down, and there are the elevators, and they can record the huge ocean and find the fish. And the second is with the smelling. They just have to looking for food, and they can find it, just smell it.
Okay, nice. So it was better as for time, but it's still a problem, Don't explain that much. When you say to start, like you described, you need to go right to the first subtopic, which would be, as you mentioned, the wing stuff, the length of the wings. So that was great that you identify that. But at the beginning, you can just go with what you have in the question. So say the lecture is about two adaptations that help seabirds find food. And that's it, or cover the ocean searching for food. And then you go right after. The first one is, I don't know, this one here, and the next one is this other one, right? So, okay, so maybe just that. Careful with timing. Make sure that you use those transitions instead of the first one, the second one. Careful with pronouns when we talk about animals. I like that you were keeping it in plural, they, but still, try to keep it like that for everything. So just that. I think timing is the only thing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else before we go?
I can try, teacher.
Yes, sure. So start now.
Okay, the lecture is about the seabirds and their adaptation to survive. To start the lecture, describe albatross. These animals develop one way to adaptation that is a long wings. With these wings, they can find food with a little energy. Then the professor goes on to explain the fulmars and the second adaptation that they have, that is smell. The smell can help them to find food like a plankton, because these tiny tubes in their nose help to find these tiny plants.
Hey, nicely done. So I love the timing of yours. So 10 seconds, even less, and then for 25, 25. Awesome. The structure is there. Just one little thing. Careful, when you have biology, usually if it's two types of adaptations, so those are the subtopics. The first adaptation would be, as you yourself mentioned, so the length of the wings, the sense of smell. And then the animals are the examples. So read the question, right? It's using the examples of the albatross and explain the two adaptations. So first you go to start the lecture describes the length of the wings, which helps them, I don't know, cover long distances, saving energy or doing this. So for example, the albatross, okay? So just that, you did the other way around. But I think other than that, you're really nailing it. So good job, well done.
Thank you, teacher.
Okay, guys. So do you have any questions about anything we've seen today? Any comments? Anything that's not so clear? Yes, Lucia?
Teacher, I don't know if I can take an advantage of this last minute and maybe can I try?
Okay,
Please.
yes. All right. So you can go now.
Okay. The lecture is about of how seabirds find food. The professor explained two ways of methods how they do. The first one is making a long wing above of the huge ocean without to use a lot of energy. And then the professor talks about of the highly developed sense of smell. Teacher, I'm sorry. Could you listen or
Yes,
not?
yes. I listened. Yeah, I listened to it all. I did. But you just spoke for 30 seconds, right? Is that correct? Or was it my internet that I didn't hear the last part?
Sorry, teacher, I can't understand because the connection is unstable.
So I was saying I did listen to it all, but you just spoke for 30 seconds, right? Is that correct? Or was it my internet that cut off when you were there?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I try. Maybe it was less than 1 minute. Yes.
Okay. So the reason I think why you had so much time was because you forgot the examples, right? You said, I love that you identify both topics. So the first one is the length of the wings, the highly developed sense of smell, but then you didn't mention the albatross and the flume here, right? So don't forget about the examples. They are important. You know how the question is. Using those examples, you got to explain the adaptations. So you gotta use them to explain them. Okay, so maybe just that. Don't forget them. That's the only thing. And also explain a bit more. You know, for example, here you say the professor describes the highly developed sense of smell that some seabirds have, and then you need to explain a bit more. So something like, so this allows them to smell their food, and that in that way they don't have to, I don't know, fly all over the ocean or something. Okay, so one little explanation, like one sentence here. So the length of the wings that helps them save energy while flying. Okay, so something more after you mention the subtopic, and then the example. Okay.
Okay, teacher. Thank you.
Okay, guys. All right. So Dan, do you have any questions now?
No.
Okay. So please, before you go, don't forget the daily survey. And I'll be seeing you guys on Thursday. Tomorrow you'll have practice session with Jasmine.
Thank you, teacher. Bye.
See you. Have a nice
Take
night.
care. You too.
Thank you, teacher. Goodbye.